going on YouTube? So I wanted to do a video continuing on my end of regular season video. Obviously this isn't a complete list yet, like I said yesterday. This is kind of the biggest disappointments for the regular season. So I got 10 of the most disappointing teams of 2015 and then 5 honorable mentions. So let's go ahead and start with the honorable mentions. The first one, and this one comes with an asterisk by it because they're not a disappointment. Actually, they pretty much defied expectations this year. But the way they finished the year wasn't very good. So that team is Utah. At one point, they were ranked like, I want to say AP number 3. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know during week 6 they were AP number 5. They definitely received some number 1 votes this year. They looked great up until I believe it was the loss to USC, I want to say. So, you know, Utah, like I said, all in all, it's been a pretty good season. It's just the end of the season wasn't very fun for them, losing to Arizona, losing to UCLA, losing to USC. Yeah, like I said, it all kind of fell apart when they lost to USC. And then, yeah, ended up with 3 conference losses. And, you know, like I said, finishing at number 24 at the end of the regular season for a team that was supposed to finish 5th in the Pac-12 South was pretty good. But a lot of that came because a lot of the Pac-12 South was very disappointing this year. Really, every team aside from Utah really was a disappointment. Alright, so that brings me to my next one, which is UCF. So UCF was one of the teams picked to win the AAC this year. Obviously, they did not come even sort of close. Turned into a complete dumpster fire this year. Did not win a single game. And, yeah, ended up firing their head. Actually, I think he just walked away. But, anyway, lost their head coach. And are pretty much starting fresh into next season. A team that's actually been one of the better like non-Power 5 teams in the last couple of years. A team that beat Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl a couple of years ago. So, you know, it's far fall. So, next one is UCLA. So, like I said, not a total bust this year. They did still win 8 games, but a team that I believe was preseason. One of the polls they were preseason number 13. You know, inconsistent year, had some big wins for sure, but you know, when it mattered, they lost. There's no other way around that. They lost to USC, lost to Stanford, lost to Arizona State, and yeah, even lost to Wazoo. So not a great season for UCLA. They might finish in the top 25, but as for now, they're outside. And yeah, 3rd best team in the Pac-12 South. So, second honorable mention is South Carolina. So, South Carolina obviously might have been the worst team in the SEC this year. By far the worst team in the SEC East, in my opinion, even worse than Vanderbilt. And, you know, they played some close games this year for sure, but it was just a rough year for South Carolina. Losing Steve Spurrier, losing multiple quarterbacks. Perry Orth did come through. He came through all right at the end of the year for sure, but it was a 1-win team in the SEC. A team that, you know, they weren't picked for the SEC East, but definitely could have done a lot better than winning 1 game. Definitely wasn't supposed to finish in the bottom half. Excuse me. All right, so that brings me to the last one, which is LSU. A lot of people are going to say that LSU was a huge disappointment, and that was because at one point they were ranked number 2 in the country, looking like one of the best teams. Brandon Harris was playing at least okay, like basically good enough, and Leonard Fournette was just on a historic tear. The defense was playing pretty good too. And then the Alabama game happened, and then it all just kind of fell apart. They lost to Arkansas. They lost to Ole Miss. Now, they did recover pretty well at the end of the year, beating Texas A&M, and they are still ranked number 21. So, really looking from where they were at the beginning of the season, ranked at, let's see, I think number 14. It was either number 12 or 14. It really wasn't that far of a fall from how they were expected to be this year. So, you really can't say it was too huge a disappointment. It was just disappointment from where they were at the Alabama game. So that brings me to number 10, which is Arkansas. Again, not the worst season ever. They did have a pretty good finish to the season, but the beginning of the season was just a complete shit show for them. They could not put anything together. They lost to Toledo. They lost to Texas Tech. Granted, 2 teams that ended up being pretty good, but 2 teams that Arkansas definitely should have beat. And, you know, they started the season ranked number 18, and they finished I want to say with the votes right now they're like number 32 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure where they are in the playoff committee's rankings, but that's like AP. So, like I said, pretty far fall from where they were, and yeah, didn't finish the year as good as they probably should have, or didn't start the year as good as they should have. And then number 9, I've got Oregon. So Oregon, like I said, finished the year pretty well. In hindsight, they really only dropped about 8 spots, but I think in the coaches' poll they ended up dropping, I want to say 13. So, like I said, just another team that had a rough start to the season and a good end. Should be better next year, but they do lose Vernon Adams. Really, the only time they had Vernon Adams healthy was for the stretch run at the end of this year. So, like I said, not a great year for Oregon. Number 8 is Boise State, and they started the year ranked number 23, and they finished the year not even in the Mountain West Championship. So that should say enough. They are in a bowl game, obviously. I think they're still a 9-win team. But being a 9-win team in the Mountain West does not take a whole lot. So, actually, it might only be an 8-win team. Had a lot of rough games this year. Definitely not. Yeah, they're only an 8-win team this year. A lot of up and down stretches to the season. Ended up losing to a team like Air Force. So not a great year for Boise State. And then number 7, Missouri. So Mizzou was just really as big a shit show as you would find in college football this year. They started the year ranked, I believe, number 22, and Matty Mock got suspended. Russell Hansbrough got hurt. The defense honestly played pretty well all year. If there's anything you can't put on the defense, Gary Pinkel left, and then you had all this stuff on campus for Missouri. Just wasn't a very good year for them. They did have like a couple big wins. They beat South Carolina. They beat BYU, but I believe South Carolina was their only SEC win. So finished 1-7 in the SECs, coming off being back-to-back SECs champions. So it's not a good year for Mizzou. Number 6, I've got Georgia. So I believe they started the year preseason number 9. Now, a lot of this, you can really blame this on 2 reasons. One is losing Nick Chubb, which is obviously just shit luck. But the other one is just the quarterback play. They finished the year, I believe, ranked outside the top 25, just outside of it. But still, if you watched a lot of their games, a lot of the games that they lost just were not good. They barely beat Georgia Tech last week. They barely beat Georgia Southern. Barely beat Auburn, got railed by Florida, got beat by Tennessee, got railed by Alabama. So I think the Alabama game was where it all started to fall through. Then they lost to Tennessee, then barely beat Mizzou, then lost to Florida. That was just a really rough season, a really rough stretch for the season for Georgia. They do finish the regular season as a 9-win team, but that is might be the worst 9-win team in all the Power 5. So move on to number 5, which is Arizona. So there were a lot of people, including myself, that had high hopes for Arizona this year. I really, really, really genuinely thought they were going to be a very good team this year. It looked like they had all the makings in place for it. Solid sophomores returning, Anu Solomon, Nick Wilson, Scooby Wright returning, and it just all fell apart. Scooby Wright got hurt, Anu Solomon got hurt at one point, Nick Wilson was hurt at one point, and just kind of played into the entire failure of the Pac-12 South as a whole. So, which brings me to my next one, which is Arizona State. They did have a few big wins this year, actually, but as a whole, a team that was preseason number 15, finishing 6-6, just was not good. Like I said, they did have some big wins. They almost beat Oregon. Granted, that was when Oregon was down. They beat UCLA, which was a really surprising one at the time. I believe UCLA was like number 6 or something like that. But also had a lot of games where they got railed, especially Texas A&M, a team that did not finish the year out well at all. So, I mean, you always have your teams that get overrated, but Arizona State was definitely one of the most disappointing teams of the year, just the way they ended up finishing the year. They are bowl eligible, but that's about all you can say that was good from this year. Alright, so the next one is USC. I get it, they're in the Pac-12 Championship this week, but that, again, largely plays into the failure of the Pac-12 South as a whole, a division that I thought was going to be great this year. Obviously I had a few teams that I expected to disappoint this year, and USC was one of them. But there wasn't even a point where I hopped on the USC bandwagon, and, after their first 2 or 3 games, they looked fantastic. Put all the talent together. There were obviously points this year where they did put all the talent together and look great. But other times where it just didn't look great, or didn't look good at all. Few examples: just Stanford game didn't look very good. Washington game I think was the low point for them, and then against Oregon they didn't play very well either. But that was just mainly Oregon just playing unbelievably well. So that brings me to my number 2 team, which is Georgia Tech. And man, they fell apart as much as any team in the top 25 this year. I finished the year at 3-9. They did beat Florida State at one point, but I think that was just kind of a fluky win. Just a terrible season for Georgia Tech, a team that I believe heading into week 3 against Notre Dame, they were one of the teams that was solidly expected to contend for the college football playoff. Because honestly, after the first 2 weeks, they looked great. They just railed Alcorn State, then beat Tulane. Even after the Notre Dame loss, they still looked like they'd be pretty good because Notre Dame was one of the top 10 teams in the country, and they only lost by 8. And then you had something like 5 or 6 straight losses before they beat Florida State, and then they lost every game for the rest of the year. Rough season for Georgia Tech. Justin Thomas was not near what he was hyped up to be, so like I said, really disappointing season. And then the number 1 disappointment, which I think everyone agrees with, is Auburn. They were preseason number 6 in the AP. Jeremy Johnson had Heisman expectations. Gus Malzahn was all in for Jeremy Johnson, and that just did not pan out well at all. Auburn finished the year 6-6. Excuse me, last in the SEC West, and just lost some really bad games. Sean White looked a lot better than Jeremy Johnson this year. Obviously, he got hurt at the end of the year, but just not. It really as bad a season as you could have hoped for as an Auburn fan. I was looking up at one point a few weeks ago, and then Sean White got hurt again. Just not a good season for Auburn. A team that, if you remember, if you watched my college football playoff prediction video at the beginning of the year, I actually don't think a single one of them is going to come true. I had Ohio State, Baylor, Auburn, and Stanford. So Stanford was my low-key pick, which actually ended up being pretty close. Ohio State looks like they're going to be left right on the outside. Baylor is struggling mightily with quarterback issues. Lost Chris Johnson today. If you guys are watching the Texas game, it's not looking good for them right now. And yeah, like I said, Auburn just not very good this year. So yeah, you could go on for days talking about the most disappointing teams. Like I said, there's teams that surprise, teams that disappoint every year, and some just are recurring names that you see on lists. USC being one of them, Georgia, Arkansas, teams that normally go in with a pretty big hype train. Even Auburn, from time to time, ranked pretty high. It was very much the same way last year. Also, they were ranked number 3 at one point, ended up finishing 8-5, and then got overhyped again. And I can't even say anything. I was one of the people that overhyped them. So it really looked like everything was going to come together. They brought in Gus Malzahn. Defense was supposed to be extremely improved. Jeremy Johnson looked good whenever he had actually played. Extremely athletic guy with a lot of arm strength. You look, there's a lot of guys that are extremely athletic with a lot of arm strength. Brandon Harris, Treon Harris. So, that's just in the SEC. So, yeah, like I said, that concludes my list of the most disappointing teams. I'll probably do a video of the most surprising. I might save the most surprising till the end of the season, though, because surprises obviously aren't over until the season's finally over. So, like I said, this is just mainly for the regular season. But, and obviously there's teams like, I'd say if USC ends up winning the Pac-12, going to a New Year's Six Bowl and then winning, you probably have to take them off the list, honestly. Obviously, either way, it's still not what they were hyped up to be. A lot of people had them in their college football playoff, but winning 10 games, including a Pac-12 championship, is obviously a huge accomplishment. You could say the same kind of goes for Georgia. If they end up winning their bowl game with a new coach, then that slides them probably back in solidly into the top 25. LSU, if they win their bowl game, that's why they were only an honorable mention, though. Oregon, if they win their bowl game, I'm not sure. I don't think they're going to get slotted in a New Year's Six bowl, but that puts them back probably into the top 12, so not too big a disappointment, but still a disappointment nonetheless. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah.